Doesn't matter how tough you are. You got 24-inch pythons. You can do 1,000 pull-ups and a million sit-ups. None of that matters if you're not mentally prepared.
Are you ready to uncover the survival secrets of a U.S. Marine? Today, we're joined by Marine Gun Builder, a Marine with real-world survival experience, who's here to share his top tips on building a strong mindset and practical prepping skills. In this episode, we'll dive into everything from mental resilience to family preparedness. Whether you're just starting or refining your survival skills, you'll find valuable takeaways to help you be ready for just about anything. Let's get started and discover U.S. Marine survival prepping secrets together. We have Marine Gun Builder on the podcast today. He is actually the first guest on the Undependent Podcast. Everybody may know him from, building guns and from Freedom Crew University, the banner just down below there. If you're watching, if you're listening, you've heard Freedom Crew University on everything else. But it's so weird to talk to you about really an independent lifestyle, prepping and that type of stuff when we know you from the firearms things. Now, firearms is kind of, leads into the prepping and independence, but tell people a little more about the overall background that you have, because you've got a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Rogue Banshee, always a pleasure being on your podcast. I'm most known for building guns, right? That's it's in the name, actually, right? Marine Gun Builder. But I did run a podcast for quite a long time, Prepare Your Tribe. And we did Sunday Night Survival podcasts, talk all about survival as well. Obviously, being a former Marine, I also went through the certified extreme cold weather school with the Marine Corps. So, lots of training on survival there. We went over to Norway, into Trondheim, where, most of you don't know this, but you'll know now if you want to go Wikipedia some stuff. But over there, the government had built enormous caves capable of withstanding a direct hit, an attack with nuclear weapons. We were afraid of the Cold War at this time. So this is going back. I'm old. I'm trying to show my age, but I'm 50. And so when I was in, that was still a big thing. Anyway, there's these enormous caves in Norway where I was deployed to. And we were doing embarkation. We were coming out. And so these caves are massive, right? They're doomsday bunkers full of brand new billions of dollars worth of military gear, brand new, everything from tanks to trucks to heavy armor, supplies, all up there, because again, the thought was that Russia would come down through Norway. And, that's how communism would try to spread downward into that land. And so Norway, being our allies, where we constructed these massive tunnels, massive caves. I was in Trondheim specifically doing embarkation, but to see, it's one thing for folks in survival to see the stuff on YouTube and kind of talk and hear these talks, but to actually witness it with your own eyes. I was a young man, like 19 years old, and see these massive, miles and miles of long, bunkers built into mountains, literal mountains that they carved into to build these structures was pretty amazing. And then be part of, doing the embarkation mission and moving all this gear and taking it down to the ships. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life, but I learned a lot. So my survival instincts, I would say, even began because I'm a Gen X child, right?
Yeah.
And we were kind of that generation that was like, hey, go outside, don't come back in until the lights are on. Yep. and even then they still had to call us in. Right? And so, we didn't have technology, we were exploring abandoned buildings and houses and going into stuff we should not go into, right? So but then going into the Marine Corps and then being formally trained on survival, and then actually seeing, large examples of what that looks like of prepping and preparation, was eye-opening. That's kind of a little bit of my background there. And then obviously gun building is my first love. Yeah, and they do go hand in hand, like you said, Banshee.
it,
They're kind of tied together, right?
it's hard to separate the one without the other, right?
Right.
If
Yeah.
you think about it, prepping or survivalist, you think about a survivalist. If you die, you failed being a survivalist, right?
Correct. Correct. Right. You
You're
did
just
not
not a
survive.
very good survivalist at that
You're
point.
right. There's no such thing as a dead survivor.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, and that's the funny thing is, through us talking, um, and really, we've really only truly known each other for about 2 years now.
Yeah.
We kind of were in the same arenas for a while. We never actually linked up until, well, Freedom Crew University. And it's kind of funny seeing the other side of you and talking to you through some of this stuff, because it's much deeper. Like my audience is a lot like your audience. They see the gun stuff and they don't know all the underlying stuff underneath. It's kind of like we're kind of like icebergs, right?
Right.
You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole base underneath of it. And that's really for me, it kind of goes back to my childhood, like yours. We're Gen X. We were worried about Cold War back then.
Yeah.
The movie War Games. I was a computer kid.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a hacker when I was a kid, and oddly enough, I'm in cybersecurity now as an adult. But it's kind of one of those things of those were what we were afraid of, and like you said, I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It was coming when the street lights came on, you came home, right? And like you said, even when the street lights came on, I was way the hell out there. So it took a while to get back. I'm running through woods, and you were talking about abandoning buildings. Where I was growing up, they were building houses, so we were all through these houses that were being built, and I look back at that stuff and I wonder how I lived through my childhood with some of the stuff that we used to pull.
Amazing we're alive.
Right? Exactly.
Amazing.
Amazing that we're alive. Because, we got home. There was nobody home. It was our job to start dinner. And usually dinner was in a crock pot anyway.
Right.
And then I was in the woods, running around the woods and all that stuff. And that's really, it's so funny for me, when I grew up, that kind of went away when I became a teenager, basically when I turned 16, right?
Right.
And then it's so weird for me to come back through it as an adult. But like everything you were talking about with the caves and stuff, for me growing up, that was all conspiracy theory. That was, sci-fi. All that stuff was not real, right?
Right.
And then it's so funny hearing you saying it not only was real, I was there. This was my job.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, so a couple of great points there. The world we did grow up in, besides like being out, people, we take this world today. You couldn't even think about putting a child in a car without a car seat and a seatbelt.
Right.
You couldn't even think about it.
We didn't have seatbelts in some of our cars.
I don't think I wore a seatbelt until like my driving test. where it was mandatory. You know what I mean? But we drove in these like big Cadillacs and big tank of a cars in the back seat. We were rolling around the back seat. We'd be in the back of pickup trucks, back of Toyota 4Runners.
We had three-wheelers.
Yeah, I didn't see. I
had three-wheelers.
Yeah, I did not know a child that wore a bike helmet. It was. No, I don't even think they sold them. Like back then, they probably did. But to me, it wasn't even something considered until you actually have your own kids, right?
Right.
But I think about smoking. I'd be in the car with family members, and they get the window like half cracked, and they're smoking in the car with us. Like we grew up in a generation where they just did not care. No, you had to find your own way. I
remember going to my grandparents' house. My grandparents lived like 2 doors down from us, and you go into the house and you could like scrape the nicotine off the paint. right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was, that's just what it was. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
no one
And
cared.
everything, the
Yeah.
whole world has become about safety, safety, security, safety, security. And,
Yes.
obviously, while some of these things are obviously much better for our society, in a lot of ways, it's like everything else. It goes way over to the side, and you create people that are unprepared to be independent in any capacity. They rely
Right.
on regulations and rely on government to tell them exactly what to do, but then when there's a crisis, government's not there. Right.
Right. Well,
And
yeah.
so you're starting to see, and I'm very grateful for this, and I know you are as well, to see that pendulum swinging. And it's been swinging for about 10 years now. It started with, oh, the people who do that are crazy extremists, and
Mhm.
they made mocking shows on, like Nat Geo and Science
Yeah.
Channel and shit like that, right, about doomsday preppers and mocking them and all these are whack jobs, to more people waking up and saying, oh, well, wait a minute, they're
There's
really
something to
not.
this.
This isn't an entertainment thing.
Yeah.
We should be, preparing. And then obviously when COVID came, that was the wake up call. And so
Yeah.
here we are 4 years post that, and it's become a really driven into the forefront of people's mind. How do I protect my family? How I know that we are truly on our own, regardless of the facade that's there. We are on our own, and what steps do I take to do that? The downside to this, and I'll be, just for a moment pessimistic here. um, the information that the algorithm rabbit hole brings you down is terrible. They're
Yeah.
not really from survival experts, they're from people cashing in on the wave of being prepared, so to speak. And there's a lot of terrible information, and people buy a whole bunch of stuff that they never need, or will not provide something of an advantage to them should a true survival situation they be faced with that. So I think that's the downside to it. But the other side to it is obviously, some awareness is better than no awareness, right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
preparation is better than no preparation. So,
Right. I
I
mean,
think we're in that stage where we're going over the crest now. People are becoming aware. They're seeking out information, and then they go down that rabbit hole looking for more and better information.
see, for me, I would say, even though I grew up in all this stuff, my journey really started, I want to say about 15 years ago. Okay. Later in life, this really hit me. There was two individuals that kind of woke me up about it. Oddly enough, they're husband and wife.
Hmm.
Um, and these are people that I literally trust my life in their hands. And going through this journey is, I remember when, everyone has their like awakening story, right?
Yep.
I remember when the light finally clicked in my head, that light switch finally got thrown, and it was overwhelming, right? It was just absolutely overwhelming. It's like, well, I need this now. I need this, and you don't have you don't think things through, right? You just like suddenly you're behind in the game, and you need to catch up, and that's when you find all the bad information because they're really good at marketing crappy products
Hmm.
or stuff you don't need. For me, I had that oh crap, moment at the same time as I had that oh crap moment right when we were figuring out that we were really screwed financially. And that was really our journey was, everybody talks about, prep for what's most likely, and you don't know what's most likely yet, right? When you wake up, you don't know. Eventually I figured out what's most likely for me was me losing my job. Right. So this is going through the financial crisis, back in 2008, through 2010 is right when we started waking up to this stuff. And we started paying off our bills. And that's what we did is we did our financial planning. And then at the same time, it's like, okay, we have a garden. Well, why didn't we learn canning? We've been gardening for years just because we enjoy the food. Well, if we have excess, why can't we store that? Rather than buying crap off the shelf, why don't I store some of the stuff and use it? And, for me, that kind of came to a head when, right at the tail end of COVID, my department got let go.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't fully prepared, but I was good 95% of the way for that, which is funny because, we went through COVID and, when everybody is like worrying about their toilet paper, um, I was just kind of sitting back laughing like, really? That's what you guys are worried about is toilet paper? Um, and really, all of a sudden now you got to go to Costco and get a pack, a big pack of toilet paper when you could have just had two sitting around and just, basically the copy can, or, use one up, replace it.
Yeah.
And people just went out. I remember going through and seeing people buying the wise containers of stored food during COVID. And I'm just like, you guys going to eat that stuff? Like you have this big thing of wise survival food. Right next to it is cans of tuna.
Right.
Why not just buy the tuna? And it's funny thinking, right at the end of that journey, seeing COVID come in and seeing people like realize they're screwed. Then I was so happy that we had prepared earlier. At the same time, I started seeing how stupid people could act too.
Yeah, and we live. Look, we kind of live in a stupid society, right? I mean, we kind of do, right? And so you have to take survival. So if we want to talk about food for a second, you have to take it back to how you're built as a human. Okay, you need to forget about everything you've ever learned about food because it's wrong when it comes to survival, right? The game has changed at that point. All right. So if you want to prep for food, okay, you want to buy, dehydrated food, whatever. You want to buy these cans of stuff, whatever. My question is are you preparing your body?
Yeah.
So that it's not just what you buy. Like how many people watching this can say that they regularly fast, once a month, you do a 72-hour fast. Like if you don't do that, you need to start doing that. You need to know what, and it's just 3 days, but you need to start fasting and start learning that once a month and know how your body reacts. You're going to find, so again, there's prepping yourself, mind, spiritually, everything, right? It's not just the stuff that we can consume and buy, right? This is mental preparedness, physical preparedness in your body, and spiritually being prepared. But you should definitely, and if you can't, 72 hours might be a lot for the first person that fast, but try to go to one meal a day. Excuse me. Try to do one meal a day for 3 days. Right.
Start slow.
You'll start to feel, the pain of hunger in the first day. Right. It's tough. Then move to 2 days. So do a week. The first week maybe eat one meal a day for 3 days, then eat not how you normally do. Then following week say, okay, I'm going to go 48 hours without eating. I'm going to do a 2-day stint. And what you start to recognize there is you start to learn your own body and how to prepare your own body to do this. Now, obviously, there's a lot of health benefits for that. By the way, you'll lose some weight, which is a good thing. Okay, and there's but more than that is you start to gain emotional control over your body, because you want to do that now where food is in abundance.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're actually not fasting or starving yourself because you can get food and eat whatever you want.
Right.
What you're doing is preparing your body to deal with these shortages. Okay. And I don't want to get on the health benefits. I want to talk about the preparation of it. But then eventually get to, once a month, I'm going to do a 72-hour fast, and I'm going to push through the hunger pains. I'm going to push through the mental capacity of, hey, I need to go get a Chinese food or, whatever, right? You need to be able to push through it. And then what you're going to find, though, is you're going to find that your body biologically is highly adaptable to
Yeah.
survival instincts. You're going to find that when you do this, not only have you prepared yourself, but you're going to find on day two, as you work through that initial hunger pain and that mental block, on day two, you're going to start to become super focused. And by three, you are like laser focused, right? And so that goes back to biology, because in the time, we're from civilizations 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
The longer they went without food, their body kicked in to hone, to hunt, right? And to
Right.
become super engaged. And you're going to find your productivity goes through the roof, your focus goes through the roof, your awareness goes through the roof. Like everything is just comes in line, and you feel so much more at peace, right? So anyway, I think there's a lot of benefits, obviously, to being prepared. I'm a huge advocate of that, but I think some of your own mental preparedness is the stuff that's not talked about enough.
I would agree with you, because if you think about it, you're really dealing with mind over matter at that point,
Mm,
right? You know, for people who have been lived in a city, they've been, where everything's been okay for years, and they've never really known hunger.
yeah.
They're not going to react well if they're not prepared for that. And a lot of the preparedness comes from mindset, right?
Mm,
It's understanding what your needs truly are. It's understanding what your body's going to do. If you have certain things, like in my household, we have a celiac.
okay, right.
So
So it becomes important.
food is very difficult at that point, because now we have to deal with that.
Yeah.
For me, it's with I have a lot of injuries. Well, what happens under certain situations where, I'm on pain management? Fortunately, it's very light pain management. Well, what happens when I know, I can't get a leave, right? Eventually, I'm going to need something, and it's understanding that, hey, we're dealing with an inflammation problem because of this injury. Well,
Mm,
you can also solve that through food, through your diet as well,
mhm.
and understanding how your body reacts. I, I, and I think that's the problem, is nobody really, like you said, nobody really talks about this stuff. Everybody talks about, bullets, beans, and band-aids,
Yeah.
right? They're the three things you need. Hey, if shit hits the fan, I'm going to run out to the woods and I'm going to go shoot a deer.
Yeah.
You and everybody else in the world is going to be out there trying to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You know, let me try to put some of that in perspective, maybe for the
Sure.
viewers that are watching. Okay. Um, Mental preparedness is the number one preparedness that you need to work on. That's number one. And to kind of illustrate that to you, all right. So obviously, I'm a former Marine, um, and well, once Marine, always Marine, but I was
Yeah,
former
let's
Marine
say
in the
you
right?
keep throwing that
No,
former Marine out
yeah, yeah.
there.
Uh, but in the Marine Corps, look, you learn something very, very important when it comes to being prepared. And that is, it doesn't matter how tough you are. You got 24-inch pythons, you can do 1,000 pull-ups and a million sit-ups. None of that matters if you're not mentally prepared. So on day one of survival school, the instructor comes out and it's always stuck with me from then on. PMA, positive mental attitude. It was a big thing that they pushed, positive mental attitude. um, People that knew the best ways of the mechanics to start fire were very successful at it. People that were excellent with land navigation and reading terrain to know exactly where water spots are going to be on any given terrain. um, Hunters, all those people, it doesn't matter how good your skill set is. It did not matter. The people who made it through were the people who were mentally prepared to survive,
Yeah.
because they had a positive mental attitude that I'm going to survive. And the ones with all of the knowledge doesn't matter if you weren't mentally prepared. So to me, that was a lesson that I lived, right? Like that I lived through. And you have to have that. If you don't have that and you don't hone that, all the stuff you have isn't gonna matter. You're gonna
Yeah.
cave. You're gonna cave, and you're not gonna make it. And somebody else is gonna come along and find all you dead and all your shit that you left behind. They're gonna be very grateful for
They'll be very grateful. Yeah.
it. You know?
It and it's funny you say that. So for me, going through search and rescue training, we talk about PMA, right? It's those are the ones that you find that is the difference between a rescue and a recovery. And
Yeah,
for those of you who don't understand what the difference between a rescue and recovery is, rescue means you found someone alive. Recovery means, well, there's a body.
yeah,
Um, and
right.
it's funny thinking about that. So like we talked a couple of weeks ago, and not a lot of people know this. And this is going to be kind of a little off topic, but it gives you an idea of that survival instinct and that survival mentality. Um, I had an accident a couple of months ago. I had fallen 12 feet onto concrete. I fought not to fall, but the ladder I was on gave out and I went down. And I remember the fall. I remember hitting, it hurt. And then I remember hitting my head on the concrete,
Mm,
right? I remember the first thing that went through my mind was, I need to get into the house where my wife is. Because if I'm, you're dealing with concussion at that point, right? If I had passed out, I'm going to be on my back, choke, die, whatever needs to happen. I know that my safety is in the house with another person. I got up as bad as I was hurt, as I got into the house because that's where I knew I needed. There's no training for that. That's just the mental
yeah, yeah,
aspect,
yeah.
right? That's your survival instincts kicking in and letting your mind do what it needs to do to get you through.
Right.
Um, and those are things that people don't think of. I mean, that's it ended up being a mild accident, right? I mean, it
Mm,
hurt, lots of bruises, lots of cuts, lots of recovery from it. It sure didn't help my knees that are bad. Sure didn't help my back that was bad. But um, you can't train for that. It's one of those things of it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of, for me, knowing, um, going through this, through the search and rescue stuff, of having that mental thing of what's next, right? It's not dealing with, oh my God, this just happens. It's dealing with that. What do I do? This happened. What do I do next? And working through that plan, working through that survival instinct. The people who give up, that, my wife could have walked out a couple hours later and found me dead, right?
sure. Could have just laid
So
there.
yeah, that's the thing, is I think a lot of people don't understand. Um, this is not just a mentality for, you know, like all of a sudden, Red Dawn happens. This is a mentality for your life. This is a lifestyle change. And that mental change is really for everything.
Absolutely, and I would actually even go further back than that, Banshee, and I would say what you were talking about earlier with Gen X and growing up. The earlier you hone this, the better. And
Yeah.
Gen X, I mean, fame, we're gonna live forever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna learn how to fly, right? Like you've been in that survival mode since a child.
Yeah,
Okay.
jumping my BMX bike over a ditch that I really probably shouldn't have done.
Right.
Right?
You know, um, and look, and so when we look at the world today, you know, especially for any folks that are watching that have parents or, I mean, that have children, or that have influence over younger folks, you want to encourage them to learn independence, right?
Yes.
When I had my first son, I was uh, guilty of it. I was like a helicopter parent. you know uh and then by the second or third, I mean, my third one, I mean, he's 7. He just send him out, go. you know
Yeah.
if something happens, is there blood? No, keep going. I don't want to hear
But
it.
it's
You
funny.
know?
There's a
Yeah,
commercial like that where it's like the
yeah,
mom has like the first kid and like puts it in the car seat and like bubble wraps the
yeah,
kid and it's like
yeah.
first kid and then like then it goes like third kid and it's just like she's like just walking off and
It
the kid's on its own.
is true. It is true. So anyway, yeah, our world has really not prepared the following generations. And I would say that we're talking about Gen X generation, but the generation above us, like my parents and grandparents, holy moly, the things that they lived through, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
my grandmother, she's 97, God bless her heart, right? I mean, she talks about like how she used to play with Mercury as a kid.
yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine that today? And she's fine. She's 97 years old.
That's
So
probably why she's 97 years
yeah,
old.
right. Yeah. So look, I think that it's really the first awareness, maybe through this conversation, is I think probably most of the folks watching this are within our realm of space. They're into this, they understand it, and they make a commitment to be more prepared for themselves and their family. And you brought up another very, very important point, is it's survival or preparedness really comes down to your unique situation. So while there's lots of information out there, okay, that's general information, it is so true. Every person's plan has to be very unique to them because there's unique situations. uh, just a couple examples of that. So obviously there might be medical treatments that are needed in order for the person to survive. Okay,
Yep.
obviously that takes priority. But there's other considerations. We talk about mentally. Okay, um, and so we talk straight at it here, right? I mean, I am as about prepared for any situation that can come my way, whatever it is. And I'm ready to attack it mentally, physically, and, with tools.
Yeah, with tools. Yeah, yeah.
Tools. Um, however, I can't just take me into account. I have a wife. I
Yep.
have 3 children. I have a mother and father that I love and adore. I have a grandmother. I have cousins and their families that I love and adore. And I don't want to live in this world without any of them. I love them,
Yeah.
right? And so their survival becomes my survival plan.
Yep.
You understand? So you have to think about these situations, and each one of these people come with different things. Like it's just a soft example here. I have a 7-year-old who's in second grade. Well, what do you do in second grade? You should really learn the master of reading and
Yeah.
writing and math, right? You're learning that. And if you're someone watching this and you got a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old newborn, up to like 7 or 8 years old, you got to be thinking, I need to take books with me. Right? I need to teach my child to read.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
need to teach
You
them
got
math. I need to be able to teach them to communicate. Like this stuff in a real world situation that's prolonged isn't going to stop. And I think that a lot of people didn't realize that. And I use, we're talking about really cool stuff here because it's the things that people did not take away from COVID that they should have taken away from.
yeah.
Okay. But one of the lockdowns is the school were closed. And the parents were like, okay, well, the school teaches them. No, like my kids woke up every day and we had school,
Yeah.
and I taught it. We're learning today. You're staying educating. And I don't think that we have felt or we will see the repercussions of what that had happened with those kids missing a whole year of school, until
It's
over the next decade. We're going to start to see that, that crisis that occurred.
it's funny because that's something that people just don't think. But going back to what you're thinking about, what our grandparents went through. their parents went through. Um, I mean, that's the education was it was readily available everywhere, right? It wasn't a school.
Hmm.
You know, you go back far enough in our history and in the history of our country, it's not that far. Kids homeschool was not a I mean, that was just a thing, right?
Correct.
I mean, the kids would learn and cut wheat, cut corn. Yeah, they worked the farm. These are things, and I love that you brought that up about the teaching of the kids. What are you going to do with your kids? And you need to think that stuff out. Going through all the lockdowns, homeschooling is starting to make a bigger return, right? There are things out there for this. And even if you don't even do that, go out to Amazon and buy some books. It's not that
Right.
expensive.
Right. Once you get your child to the level of reading, okay, and they can read, then teaching them becomes very easy, right? The big part is getting them to read because obviously that's how we learn, right? Being
Mhm.
able to read, right?
Yes.
Once you get that foundation down with them, though, the learning can then accelerate very, very fast because then we're just talking about comprehension of what you're reading. Okay.
Right.
But yes, I mean, it was a big lesson that this world unfortunately did not learn during COVID. They didn't
No.
learn it. They did not learn it. And, now you hear about, these COVID kids and what's going to happen. And, what is the long-term results? Like, we don't know. But the reality is my kid's not going to have that problem.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And because I was prepared for that. And
You
that's
think
what preparedness is, because even after whatever the event is or whatever it is over, there is still suffering long beyond that initial event. And the
right.
whole point of being prepared isn't just to survive, but is to thrive through it and after,
Right.
right?
Yeah. No, I love where you're going with that because that's the thing. One of the things that drives me nuts is they came out with like the survival seed banks.
Mm,
And when they came out with that stuff, and look, this is not even just being a prepper or anything like this. This is just somebody who's gardened for a long time. It's like, what are you going to do with that? Do you know how to plant that food? Okay, great. Do you know how to take care of the plant once it starts? Do you
right.
realize that okay, you got to give it water? Where are you going to get water from? You
Correct.
know, depending on what you're preparing for or
Yeah.
what is happening to you, you're not you don't have the tools to get through that. The
Correct.
people who have the rest of the tools to get through that, it's like, fine, okay, I have seeds. I understand. We use heirloom. Everything that we grow is heirloom. And we understand seed saving. We replant and things through that. When everybody else is GMO seeds that are non-heirloom and all that stuff, when they are just not they're not producing food, it's fine. We're still thriving through that and beyond. Because that's an important thing to say is this is not an incident that is short lived. Whatever is going to happen is going to play out over time.
Correct.
And going back to that mindset, I don't for most people that are preppers, and for those on the audio side, I'm using air quotes. A lot of them are not prepared for that. They're thinking it's going to be, hey, red dawn, this is going to happen, and then in 1 year it's all going to be done, and then everything will be hunky dory.
Yeah, I mean, your
No,
fly by nighter is just buying seeds and has no idea what to do with the seeds.
yeah,
Like you're saying, they don't know. And you can go down into the climate that you live in, and climate changes and the type of soil that you plant in that seed. And I mean, there's so much that goes into it, right? Um, but yes, you're right. People are not. You might have the tool, but you don't know how to use it. I talk all the time about how these people, I'm gonna go on the Nomad, and I get all my survival gear, right? And their boots are brand new and their pants are like you're gonna stick out like a sore thumb.
yeah,
You know what I mean? You've got to look the part as well. Like there's just so much there. But I think the biggest point of like where I changed like I talk, if anybody wants to, you can go over to my channel and go into the podcast area. There's Sunday Night Survival. There's a series of it where I talk about a lot of these things that are not specific to, hey, guns, food, water,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Backpacks and all that stuff, right? Where it's these types of things that you really should be focusing on, because these things that we're speaking about today are the most likely.
Right.
And then we've proven that through the epidemic of COVID, right? That this is the most likely stuff that you need to be prepared for.
So it's funny. It's so funny thinking about this because the one thing that is sad about going through this exercise. Well, I don't want to say exercise through this pandemic or however you want to say it, where whatever political view you have of it. A lot of people woke up and then went right back to bed when it ended. Um,
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of people that woke up that is like, okay, great. I am not prepared. And they've changed their life for it, and I'm happy for that. But that's that's an issue that I think we have is the people like, oh, I lived through COVID. I'm going to live like COVID. Look, COVID ain't crap compared to what could happen.
correct.
Period.
Yeah,
I know people that they made it through COVID. They're not going to make it 2 months without their job.
right.
They're not going to make it 2 months without food. They're not going to make it 2 months without gas for their car. I mean, there. I could take one little thing. I can take one little thing away from them, and they're not going to make it.
Well, I can tell you now, all right, just based on the real estate market and these young folks buying these houses at 4, 5, 6, seven hundred
Yep.
thousand, because that's what the market is now. 4, 5, 6, 700,000 for a cookie cutter house in a in a
And
neighborhood, right? In a family neighborhood, that's what they're
and
going
that's
for.
and that's here in Montana too.
Yeah, I mean
That's not
it's all
anywhere.
it's
That's
all over the place,
everywhere.
right? It's all over the place. And so to your point, Jay, you're absolutely right. Like, when you have something that high overhead, of a mortgage and the brutal taxes in this
Yeah.
country and the insurances, it would be hard to go 2 weeks without a paycheck. And they're not prepared for that because their home broke, right?
Right.
They're broke by their house. And I have a little compassion there as well, because you know, some of it is it's just where we are. But the question is that why do you have that house?
Yeah.
Like, if you're really starting to think about prepping and you're real serious, you have to think about that financial aspect of it and becoming, because everything you've learned about money has come from probably either your parents who are good or bad with it and teachers or society at large.
Yeah.
And what we know is 99% of them get it wrong, because only 1% of us are really wealthy.
Because
Right? So
yeah.
99% of the world is getting it wrong. And why do you have a house? Okay. Well, and I would say, why do you have a house that sucks up so much of your income?
Mhm.
Because that house is also filled with stuff,
Yep. Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
costs money. And so you need to look at that and need to say, okay, um, am I above or below water, or am I even? I think that's a big question there financially, right? Am I above, below, or under? But then recognize what your expenses are and start to do that plan, because there's going to be another financial crisis. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to happen, my friends. That is
Even the
probably more
even the
sooner than
financial
later.
experts are saying it's coming.
Yeah,
I mean,
just seeing the amount of money that has just been wasted and thrown away. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and inflation the way it is, it's
mhm.
pretty obvious there is some more suffering. Now, does it go real bad? Who knows? But there's definitely more suffering.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just going to tell you, not because I'm older and I come from a different time and all this other stuff, but these friggin' houses aren't worth $500,000. Are you crazy?
No.
They're
There-
not.
and that's
Our system is greed to steal your money. And when you do that, you're allowing them to steal your money. The house I'm in right now cost $150,000 when I bought it, and it's worth $500,000. GTFO. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
I get it, because
like,
we've been in this house 18 years. When we bought the house, it was 220,000, and even we were like, that's high, right?
Yeah.
So this house, I think, would probably go for around 600 right now.
Right.
And
Right.
it's the funny thing is my wife and I were like, we would never pay $600,000 for this house.
Not in your lifetime.
We had a hard time paying 220 for it.
Right.
And that's the thing, and what you're talking about, the financial people, I'm very open about this. And I talk about it. When we were in financial debt, we were somewhere, and we did not track everything in the beginning. We didn't think about it until we got halfway through. Like, we should have tracked this in the beginning. We were somewhere between $65,000 and $75,000 in credit card debt, 2 mortgages, a car, and a car payment. And trust me, my car is not that that great. It's a 2010 Ford Fusion. Still have it today. It's been paid off for a while, but it's one of those things. Is when we went through this exercise, my wife and I were never on the same page, and suddenly we were on the same page one day, and we made it. It sucked. Trust me, it sucked. We paid off. We paid off the credit cards. We paid off. And that's the whole thing. Is our exercise was just to get out of the credit card debt. Once we got through the credit card debt, we're like, what's next? Right? Second mortgage of the house. Paid off second mortgage of the house. We paid off the house during COVID.
Yeah.
We had no plans on going this far, but once you start going down this thing and seeing, for us, we were preparing for job loss. That was the most likely thing to happen to us, and it did happen. Were we fully prepared? No. Like I said before, we're about 95% prepared, but it happened right at the end of COVID. We were so happy we did that. At the same time, we're seeing foreclosures everywhere. It was when I remember going down to the city county building to pay our taxes in cash, physical cash, while I didn't have a job. Because that was our whole thing, is we were preparing for financial disruption in our life.
Mm-hmm.
But along with that financial disruption comes, well, if I have a financial disruption, I still need to buy food, right? I still need food.
Right.
So we had food, right? I mean, whatever you're preparing for, it dovetails to other situations as well. You might not be fully prepared for that other situation, but you're farther down the road than most people are. We lived in a very consumer household. We were always in debt in my house. As an adult, I had to go through this exercise 15 years ago to learn how to get out of debt and not be in debt. When we spend money, we freak out about spending money now, which we should have been doing years ago. Talking to my sister, she lives in Europe. She went through the same thing probably a few years earlier than I did. And she's in the same situation where I'm at now. And trust me, that debt it's bad. It was rough on us. It was rough on our marriage. It was rough on everything.
So can I give some? I got some things to
absolutely
tell you, and if you're still watching here at 48 minutes or so, right? I think this is going to be very crucial for you to hear. The truth is that prepping is independence.
Yes.
Right. We're talking about independent mindset. So financial preparation means you need to start preparing to become independent and
Independent.
not rely on a paycheck and not rely on a job. And I get it, I get it. Um, there's a safety and security there, but like this is all what we're talking about. Safety and security goes away. What do you do?
Yep.
Right. And so you need to stop building independence outside of your job, i.e., you need to be able to start generating income independently
Yes.
and a flow. And then you need to say, okay, well, how do I do that? Now, there's tons of these, fly by night or side hustles, this, side hustle that. Put all that aside. Don't do any of that, first of all, and don't pay for any of those stupid programs. Okay. Number one, number one is you need something that is not whatever you do to generate your own income independently. The first thing is it cannot be something that is one of the first things to go in a crisis. In other words, you don't want to be in a market where there's not money when there's a financial crisis. That even when there's a financial crisis, people still want whatever it is, a product or a service that you offer. It is immune and will not be taken away during times of economic decline. All right. So for me, being a preparedness person and my business is what? Firearms.
Yep.
Right? So lucky for probably most of your audience, they're firearm lovers. So I'm here to tell you, get in this business in some form or fashion, some way, find out what your passion is. And even if you make $100 a month, it's $100 a month you didn't make more last year, and you can
Exactly.
all do that. And then a month two, make 200 a month, and a month three, make 300 a month. You don't need to go from zero, quit my job to you know, build a firearms business. Okay.
Right.
And understand firearms is huge, right? There's everything from parts, accessories to firearms to ammunition to education. I mean, it's endless gear. It's just endless. Okay. But figure out what you want and start to take strides towards generating income that way. And then here's the other thing, all of the income that you make. So you talked a lot about debt. What I had to learn was like you, right? I went through a lot of debt in my time as well, and I had to learn how to use debt to create income. So
Yes.
nowadays, the debt that I have is inventory, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
debt that
Right.
I'm holding is inventory, things that are
Right.
going to be sold. I don't hold any debt for anything else. But again, this is a mindset. Jason, you were talking earlier, you got a 2010 Ford Fusion. It's mindset. I have CX9, it's got 150,000 miles on it. It's paid for. And yeah, I could go buy a brand new one right now, but I'm not because I put that money in good debt,
Right.
inventory. I don't
Yep.
want bad debt. So you also have to have that mental discipline to say, you know what? I'm going to give up the I don't know what we would call it, short-term ego, whatever, comforts, statuses, whatever they want. Because here's at the end of the day, I have, you have a Ford Fusion, probably well over 100,000 miles now, right?
100,
I get this car at 100.
132,000
Right,
miles. My wife's car is a 94 Honda Civic with
right,
260,000 miles on it.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reality is takes us the same distances, whether we had these cars, right?
Yep.
Or we had a Ferrari. The difference
Yeah.
is the Ferrari would have cost us 2 million to make it 250,000 miles, right? So, you have to think about it that way, right? Like I don't really need the excess. I
Right.
don't, but I'm not suffering either. My
Right.
it's got a moon roof, it's got power everything, it's got leather, it's got,
Yeah. I got Bluetooth in
Apple
my car. Yeah.
CarPlay. It has everything that every other car would have, right? But I don't need the excess. I don't need the status. I don't need that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to start thinking about these purchases you make.
Yep.
Is this purchase, this money that I spend, because money is hard to come by. It's hard. It
Yeah.
is hard. And so when I have it and I spend it, you need to think, is this good debt or bad debt.
Is it an asset or a liability?
Correct. Put money in my pocket or take money out of my pocket.
Yep.
And um, I guess the big thing I want to push on this little segment here in financial is start to do something. If you're only an employee, I mean, if you own a business, you're self-employed, obviously you're already on that track. Just make sure it's something that is pretty proof of a lot of what we're talking about, right? It can't be susceptible to these, declines in a
Right.
massive way. But start to do something. Make a commitment that you're gonna do something, and do that.
When I had employees, and this is even before I even went through this journey, um, what I used to tell my employee, I remember this very specific discussion with one of my employees, and we went through this thing, and I go, look, I realize you work for me for this organization, right? I hope you work for me because you want to. I realize you work because you have to. He's like, okay. I go, but who do you work for? He goes, well, I work for you. I go, wrong answer.
Correct.
And he goes, well, I don't understand why it's a wrong answer. I go, you work for yourself. No matter where you are, your boss is you. You hold yourself to a high standard. You hold yourself above that. And just realize that no matter what company you work for is going to do what's best for them at any given time. So therefore, you need to be able to do what's best for you at any given time.
Yep.
When that employee eventually left the organization, and when he came up to me, it wasn't comfortable for him to resign, right? Especially since we had such a great relationship. But when he went through that, he goes, look, this is what's best for me and my family. And I go, I am so happy for you. I'm sad to see you leave, but I'm so happy for you because you made the right decision for you and your family.
Yeah.
And, but that's the whole thing. I mean, going back to the mindset, you got to have that mindset. So if you have that mindset of you work for a company, you are your own boss, regardless of who you work for. Well, then you also need to look around the outside, like you were saying. What else can I do? For me, I have skills. I make money. My day job, I make money with my brain, not with my hands. That's good and bad, right? I don't know if it's my midlife crisis that I got into gun. I've been in guns since I was a kid, but being an FFL and gunsmithing and all that stuff, I now have hard skills too. I can think my way through IT and cybersecurity problems, or I could build a gun or fix a gun or do something else. So I can go, I'm becoming multifaceted at that point. You want to be valuable no matter where you are.
Yeah, I can tell you how to get mentally prepared or to know if you're mentally prepared. It's very, very simple, folks. If you're uncomfortable, you're in a good spot. You're preparing yourself.
I love that.
Right? If you're uncomfortable, so like you talked about earlier about being $75,000 in credit card debt, you were uncomfortable and bang, you were able to get out of it. Right? So put yourself in uncomfortable positions all the time. We talked about fasting. Put yourself in that mental uncomfortableness on purpose. Do it on purpose. Make yourself uncomfortable because you're going to see how, again, we all have this within us. We all do. It's just some of us tap into it and some of us are forced into it, right? What we're trying to tell you in preparation is not to get to the point where you're forced into it and now you're trying to figure it out.
Right.
Be in a position where you're thrusting yourself into it and figure it out.
So, it's funny thinking about that. It was just today because I'm working through my injuries, all that stuff. I was in the best shape of my life in 2015. And 2015 is when the injuries started hitting me. And it took me down. And I am 280 pounds of, 6'2", used to be 6'3" before the back injury. But it's one of those things of, I wasn't in the best shape of my life back then because I was comfortable. I was watching my food. I was doing I was doing cardio, an hour cardio 6 days a week. I was pushing myself. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because getting ready to go through that journey again. I'm getting out of my mental funk that I've been in with the injuries. I finally decided, hey, let's attack this thing. I know how to do this. That losing weight is not a secret, right? It's just not. It can come out. It can be as basic as calories in, calories out. Now you want to make sure things are right, all the right calories and stuff. But that's the thing. I'm uncomfortable where I'm at now. I'm going to pull myself out to try to get myself into where I'm more comfortable. I'm never going to be perfectly comfortable. Um, but I like where you're talking about that. Put yourself into uncomfortable position. I put myself into an uncomfortable position, which is going to make me try to get out of that uncomfortable position.
Yeah. So
Um,
look, can I speak specifically about that? It's November 7th.
Absolutely.
It's November 7th. And, you know, again, we're talking about preparation and I'm going to talk about fasting. Okay. And I'm going to talk about OMAD, 1 meal a day. Okay. Talk about OMAD. It's November 7th. If you do this from now until the end of the year, which is just December 31st, just like 6 weeks away.
Yep.
Okay. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop 40 pounds in 6 weeks. That's what's going to happen. Number one. Number two, because your body is now in a fasting state consistently, okay, it's going to heal all your old injuries. All that old tissue is going to start to get healed automatically without medication, without anything else. Your senses are going to become like a wolf. You're going to become totally keen. In this process, the first 2 weeks are the toughest,
Yep.
right? The toughest mentally. You get through the first 2 weeks, you're going to start to now become an animal. Your animalistic instincts are going to come in. Your caveman instincts are going to come in. You're going to be on everything you do, no matter how big or how small, is going to be super in tuned. You're going to feel like a superhero. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to watch this that have done the things that I'm talking about, and they'll be like, "Yep, I felt so great when when I was in that state." Right? They're going to talk about it. And for those who haven't, please do. And I ask you, Jason, please do it. Please
Yeah.
do it. Because I tell you what the weight comes on for. All right. So this actually happened to me. So I'm obviously a life. So my parents, let me give you some background here. My parents are both triathlons. Okay. Um, my mother and father are, uh, my dad's 72, my mom is 70. Okay. They still, ride their bikes 50 miles every weekend and go on these massive kayaking trips and running. And I mean, they are insanity even at that age. Okay. So I grew up, I'm an only child. I grew up with these people as parents. Okay. With these people as parents. I went into the Marine Corps. Hard physically, man.
Yep.
Hard. Okay. I have 2 black belts and I'm a martial arts instructor in Taekwondo and Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. I have lived my entire life under these principles of health, fitness, right? My entire life. We talk about financial collapse too, but and so for those who are watching that don't know this backstory, just really brief, very quick. But when this stuff hit is also when the anti-gun groups came after us. They shut down my website, they pulled
Yep.
my Facebook, they pulled almost all the YouTube videos, and put me out of business. So I went from making a good living and lifestyle to zero, no income at all
Yep.
overnight. And it brought me to the brinks. What happened there? Now, I'm one of the most prepared people that you could speak to, okay? But I was not prepared to go to zero.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for that, okay? But depression kicked in. I'm Mr. Positive Mind addict, but
It's
depression kicked in,
yeah.
and and I'm lost, and I'm eating,
Yep.
right? And this is the thing, you don't see how fast it comes on. Cookie here, this there, my wife loves to bake. God bless her heart, but that's all she does is bake and bake and bake and bake and cook and cook and cook. And it's like, it just started to come on. And then I was getting heavier and making me more depressed than I already was because I had all these other problems. And then every time I tried to dig it out, I was targeted. Like I wasn't getting approved to process credit cards because I was on a blacklist by the government. Like all this shit was coming at me, and I couldn't get out of it. And I was finding myself almost in a victim mode, which I hate, right? But it was driving me nuts. But the weight was there. The weight was there. The weight was there as well. And the weight can mess you up mentally more than anything else going on in your life. Yeah. Because when you don't have the weight and you have the physical fitness aspect of it, and you feel, and even put away how fit you are, put that away. Okay. But you feel good about yourself, regardless of what else is going on in your life, you feel unstoppable. Okay. That's when fasting, I got serious about that. And within 6 weeks, it turned my life around. And so, and these are things that I've always known. I just, I was comfortable. I wasn't,
sure.
I was also such a maniac at the time of fitness and anything. If I wanted a cookie, I could have a whole thing of Chips Ahoy. It didn't matter because I was so physically fit, it would go away, but now we're in a different world, right? I don't have the time to go exercise anymore. My life is crumbled. I'm at zero. I have to sit in front of this computer. I have to plan out new things. I have to find income like yesterday. And it took me, as you know, but we had some deep conversations kind of when like you came into my life. Yep. But that was the hardest year. I don't even know how I sit here before you today and didn't claim bankruptcy and we didn't lose it all. I really don't. I don't know how I came out of it. But I know a piece of
survival instinct.
I know a piece of that is dealing with me first and the situation I was in, and then dealing with the rest.
Well, and that's funny. So I love how you're talking about that because I say that my outward appearance is a lot of my inward appearance, right? I was the same way. I was in great shape. It didn't matter if I ate a cookie. It didn't matter if I ate 5 cookies. It didn't matter because I was so used to being in steady state cardio for an hour at a, with a pulse rate of 135.
Right.
It was easy. I would get up and I was there for an hour. Yeah. It didn't matter. I burned calories like crazy.
So here's one of the lessons. I think this is important for preparation. So you talk about all the things that we learn. Calories in and calories out is actually a lie.
Yes.
Because not all calories are created equal.
That's why I said it depends on your calories.
100 calories of an Oreo cookie and 100 calories of broccoli are completely different the way your body processes it, right?
Exactly.
So you can't just do calories in, calories out, or count calories. It's really a waste of time, long term it is. Long term, it's not going to pay dividends, because
it's funny because I was looking at the reason. It was funny. I was just looking at it today because I'm getting ready to launch a new series coming up next month, and so I was looking at the Fitbit app because I had a Fitbit back then. I was logging all my food and I was figuring out what my macros were, that's what what Marine Gun Builder was talking about. Your calories count depending on what it is. Am I eating too much fat? Am I eating not enough protein and stuff like that? And I started logging yesterday. Yeah, actually yesterday I started logging again to try to figure out where my diet is, right? Like what am I eating? How much I'm eating? I know I'm eating too much. I know what to do, but it's one of those things of it's a mental activity for me, right?
It is. That's what we're talking
awareness.
About. Mentally preparing yourself. So look, you can solve all those questions, everybody here, because we all have it. You can solve all of that by simply not eating.
Yep.
Just stop. Just don't. And push through the mental acuity. That's what's going to happen. Your brain's going to be like, eat, 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 eat. Your body doesn't need it. You don't need it. You're not gonna die. You go to sleep every night and wake up for 12 hours and haven't eaten, you didn't die. You're not gonna die. You got plenty on you. You're fine. You need to stay hydrated and you need some salt. And that's it. Those are the two things you need. But you can eat once a day and you are absolutely positively fine. Nothing's wrong with you. You can go 2 days. You can go 3 days. Okay. On the third, you're going to work up to the third day, like 3 weeks it's going to take you. But, you can go 3 days without food, and then you can eat. But then when you eat, you can eat, more, but don't eat, 3 large pizzas. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
right.
It's that kind of mentality. But the thing here, all the physical stuff, look, weight is in the kitchen. Fitness is in the gym. They're
Yeah.
completely different things. And I think a lot of us have grown up with the food pyramid and the government telling us all of these things, and they're a lie. They're just a lie. Like eggs are bad for you. Eggs are a superfood.
Well, look, yeah, eggs are bad for you. Now they're good for you. Now they're bad for you again. Now
Right.
It's like,
Right.
would you guys make up your mind what the hell it is?
Right. So the
Yeah.
biggest thing that you can do is learn your own body and mental state. And if you really want to be in preparedness, again, what has been so great about this conversation today is we're not talking about gear, we're not talking about guns, we're talking about the things that truly matter when it comes to being prepared. And for everybody watching, you gotta just try OMAD. One meal a day for a week. And in that week, skip a whole day, right? So if I eat now, it's noontime, I have lunch, and let's say it's a Thursday, then I'm not going to eat until tomorrow, Friday, at noontime. Okay. I'm not going to snack in between. I'm going to push a lot of water and I'm going to work through. Your mind's going to mess with you guys. It's going to mess with you. Okay. But you need to tell it to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
Okay. You're fine. Your body internally is going to start to go from having to process all this food all the time, every time you put something in your mouth, to doing its other work, which is cleaning up your system.
Yeah.
Cleaning up those old tissues, those old injuries. Do this. And then one day in that week, say, you know what? So it's Thursday at noon. I'm supposed to eat on Friday at noon. I'm not going to eat until Saturday at noon. And I know this sounds like, oh my God, I might have never done this. And you probably haven't, but do it. And you're going to find, you're going to be writing down in the comments. You're going to be seeking us out, thanking us. Wow, man, I'm glad you told me to do this. It sucked at first, but I pushed through it. I had the mental, here's the word of prepping, all the prepping. I had the mental discipline to see it through. And wow, the benefits are amazing. Thank you for putting me on this track. And then you just start, and until you get to where you want to be. But even when you're where you want to be, you still do it. I still fast. People all over the world fast, for religious reasons, mostly. Okay. But this is a very old way of life for us.
This is going back to our core being as a human.
Correct. The benefits are amazing. But in with this, what we're really talking about, so it trains your mind for all this, all great, helps you become better. But what we were saying is now that you feel great and it's fast, like 4 to 6 weeks, like these people with these crazy diet plans, all this other stuff, man, and they want you to spend all this money to get delivered to your house, this types of food that you got to cook and all this nonsense, and you spend thousands of dollars. None of it's necessary. Tap into who you are as a human and do this program. It takes no money. It takes no extra types of food. Going to the grocery store, reading labels. You don't need to do any of that. Eat whatever you want to eat. Just do it once a day, and that's it. Stop.
There you go.
So, anyway.
Awesome. Well, we've been rolling, about an hour and 13 minutes. It didn't even seem like that long.
Goodbye. Great conversation, though, Jason. As
it was, because that's one thing that always drove me nuts about. I mean, you listen to Prepper podcast, and everybody's talking about the gear and all that stuff. And look, the gear. I'm not saying the gear is not important, but you've got to have that solid base, and the solid base starts with what's in your head. And if you can't get that under control, you're not going to get everything else under control, which is why I've loved this conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's awesome to have other people that are in this, that are talking about this stuff, not just go buy gear. Hey, look, the economy is going to go melt down. Go buy gold. And by the way, you can buy it through my affiliate link where I make money. It's like I'm sick of being sold everywhere you go. Consumerism, absolutely. And that leads to the debt crisis that we all have.
Right.
But no, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us about this, because it's great to have other people talk about the whole mental game of being prepared for whatever you're being prepared for. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Undependent Podcast. Preparedness is not just about survival gear. It's about peace of mind, resilience, and practical self-reliance. Remember, these U.S. Marine survival prepping secrets can help you prepare not only for emergencies, but for everyday challenges. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it to someone who needs these insights. Tell us in the comments, what's your next step in your preparedness journey? And be sure to check out our playlist for all this type of content. Stay ready, stay resilient, and never be caught off guard. See you next time.